Hey, Steve Saretsky here. As always, Canadian real estate market update and a particular focus on Vancouver. If you're getting sort of value and entertainment out of these videos, all I ask you hit thumbs up and subscribe. Questions, comments, put those below. I want to touch on something here quickly to sort of frame up this week's video. And I promise you, it might sound like I'm rambling here for a bit, but stay tuned, stay with me, because I promise you there is a purpose and an intention behind all of this. Because some of you may or may not be aware, I was recently ousted on Twitter as being someone that is flipping properties through a numbered company and is the ultimate evil in this world. So I want to quickly touch on that because I want to remind everybody that the sole purpose of this channel is financial education. I am a capitalist, a proud capitalist at heart, and the purpose of this channel is to help educate people on the financial system and obviously provide some value as it pertains to the Canadian economy and the Canadian real estate markets, where I obviously have my core competency. And talk about, he's doing these projects in Vancouver, he's flipping houses. I spend 60 hours a week working in this space. Every single day I'm working. I'm putting out these YouTube videos every single week for the past 5 years. I have built up a core competency. And I think if you study any sort of successful people, one thing they say is they double down on their core competency. So obviously, if I have a knowledge and an expertise in that space, naturally I am more inclined, it makes more sense for me to then invest in that space and core competency. It does not make sense for someone like myself to try to go out and pick 20 individual stocks when my area of expertise is in the local real estate market here. So again, investing in a just for a quick summary for those that are a little bit confused. I flip properties in a numbered company. Now, a numbered company, oh, that sounds like this guy's avoiding taxes. I pay just as much tax as everybody else. A numbered company is a company that literally just doesn't have a name on it. And I have shareholders, business partners that are obviously shareholders. So from a tax and accounting perspective, that's how you do it. So there was no sort of like weird shenanigans that are going on. There's nothing to discover or uncover about me. In fact, these property flips have been talked about here on YouTube. They actually are publicly available, and they still are publicly available on my Instagram account. So again, I have literally nothing to hide. I think I've been very transparent about my real estate portfolio here on this channel. But why I bring this all up is because, again, I think that this channel, again, if you're like, a housing activist and you dislike real estate and real estate investing is not your thing and you think it's immoral, I honestly would encourage you to unsubscribe and leave the channel, because, again, moving forward, I really cannot emphasize enough that this channel is focused on educating people financially and particularly in the real estate space. So why I'm saying this and why I'm bringing this up is because I want to help people protect their hard-earned capital any way that I can. So most people are working a 9 to 5, working hard every day, putting in 20, 30, 40, 50 years of working. And you're working in a system that literally is designed to basically keep you working. Inflation is just that. It is a tax. It is a tax on your income. An inflation target of 2% per year is a tax on your income. The only way to avoid these taxes, so to speak, is obviously to invest in assets, and particularly invest in assets the government essentially wants you to be in. I think it should be pretty obvious to people at this point that Canadian real estate is an asset class that the government is overcompensating and basically nudging you to go into. Okay, you have tax-free gains on your primary residence. There's obviously all sorts of depreciation taxes that you can get into. We can talk about cheap leverage. That we can talk about the Canadian government and the Bank of Canada, for example, obviously coming in and supporting financial markets, supporting the commercial banks so they can continue to lend into the space. So that's the game. So you might not like the game, you might disagree with that, but the reality is there's not one individual here that is going to be able to change that game. There's actually not one politician, despite what they say. There's no one politician that you think that just because you re-elect a new prime minister that they're going to suddenly come in and change the game. This is much, much larger than anyone. So all you can really do is just you can focus on yourself and learn the rules of the game and protect your hard-earned capital that you've just worked really hard for, and hopefully give yourself a better life and hopefully give your family a slightly better life. That's all you can do. And so that's what I want to focus on, because it's very interesting. I gave an interview to a large media outlet here in Canada a couple days ago. And off the record, the reporter comes up to me and goes, "Hey, off the record, can I ask you, how are people affording these homes? How are people buying this real estate? Like, $1.8, $1.9, $2 million for a house. Like, I don't get it. I work hard. My husband works hard. We're working hard. Why can't we afford real estate in the city?" And obviously it really gets you thinking, but there's so many variables. What I was trying to emphasize, and obviously again, keep in mind, this is mainstream media. This is not someone that's necessarily a financial expert that is in the finance space or is an investment broker, or this is someone that is trying to sort of grasp that basically there's something broken. I think everybody feels deep down that there's something, the economic system isn't quite working. Something doesn't quite feel right. Like, my wages aren't really going up, but yet asset prices, like the cost of shelter, my rent keeps going up more every year. The real estate that I want to purchase keeps going up more and more, and I'm not able to keep up. So people feel that something is broken, but they can't explain it. So I was trying to explain to her that, everything that we've been taught, growing up, like from your parents' generation, or what you learn in school from your school teachers, is that, what is that notion? It's, go to school, get a degree, you get a job, you work hard, you save your money, and eventually you'll be able to buy a piece of real estate, and that's what you're taught, right? You're taught to pay down debt, save money, pay down debt. And the economic system, the financial system, has been flipped on its head. This is not your grandfather's real estate market. This is not your grandfather's economy. So what I mean by that is, I was trying to explain, is that if you look at it today, you are incentivized to actually take on more debt, more leverage than you are to save. You are actually being incentivized, you're being discouraged by policymakers to save. They don't want you to save. So let's just unpack this for a minute. So I was explaining to her, I said, well, first of all, you've got this wealth transfer, so that's kind of a large facet of it. It's not like people are just saving all of this money. They're usually already on the housing ladder. They're leveraging one asset to go in, climb up, and then you've got parents. But I said the one thing you're looking at is, you can get a mortgage today at 2%. So you get, a 5-year, you lock in this debt for 5 years at 2%. Inflation, as per the Bank of Canada's own metrics, which again, I would argue are not actually accurate. I think that they are underreporting inflation, perhaps intentionally. But inflation's running at 3%. So you're actually basically, it's a negative 1% real mortgage rate. That's how I look at it. Now, again, you might disagree with it, but statistically speaking, it's a negative real mortgage rate. So you're actually being encouraged to essentially take on debt. So you're fixing the cost of that debt for the next 5 years. Meanwhile, that they're going to inflate, they're going to devalue the value of that currency by 2 to 3% per year, and arguably more, because I think, again, inflation is a bad metric. So the value of that debt is eroding over time. So that was kind of what I was trying to explain to her. Now, if you look at this, and again, we were told back in the day to save. Look at I want to go back to like, this is probably the old school economy. Let's go back to the 1990s, for example, in Canada. You used to have GICs, so, guaranteed investment certificates, savings vehicles that on average in the 1990s, from 1990 to 1999, on average GICs were returning. You had GICs, the rate on GICs was about 7%. So you would get, you put your money in a GIC, you get about 7%. Now inflation was around 1% to 2%, 1.5% to 2% in the 1990s. So like on average, if you actually go back and look at the data, which I have, if you go back and look at the data in the 1990s, the real rate of return, so the rate of interest that you're paid on your GIC minus the rate of inflation, on average, GICs earned you about 5.5% for that decade. So you got a real return of about 5.5%. Now, fast forward to today, if you're putting in a GIC, you're going to be extremely lucky to get 1% on your GIC. Inflation is running again right now at, they say it's 3%, so maybe it's transitory, maybe it's not. But let's keep it simple and say it's 2% because that's the bank's target. So what they're saying is every year you're going to lose 1% of the value of that GIC. It's a real negative interest rate on a savings vehicle. So what does that mean? Again, savings are yielding zero. They're actually yielding negative. And to take on debt, you're actually being essentially paid to take on the debt. So this is what I'm saying. It's like you can't, becomes the whole aspect of this financial education piece and on the real estate piece. Again, I'm not saying that, okay, hey, listen, if you don't like Vancouver real estate, that's fine. That's fine. I'm not the biggest bull in Vancouver real estate. I've already told everybody on this channel that I have investments in Calgary real estate. Because I think there's higher cap rates. I think there's probably less vulnerability to a shock in interest rates because I think that valuations haven't really moved much. I think that there's arguably fair value in Alberta and particularly in Calgary where I'm at. But now if we look at the 1990s, right? I just told you that you had a real rate of return on saving instruments around 5.5%. Look at national home prices in the 1990s basically didn't move. They went sideways for almost a decade. They basically did not move because, and I said this before and I'll say it again, I can guarantee you that there will be a lot less housing speculation if savings returned more than zero. If, for example, for myself, I personally would be less inclined, for example, to flip real estate if I earned 6% by literally doing nothing and in a safe savings instrument. Becomes a risk-reward scenario. But if you're telling me, hey, listen, if you just keep your money in your checking account or in the GIC, you will lose money every single year. You force me, and this is literally the entire quantitative easing program by these central banks. It says they are trying to push people out onto the risk curve. So in order to get any sort of yield, the central bank literally says, we want you making alternative investments. So you see more money like pension funds and stuff going into real estate. You see more people going into the private equity space. You see a lot more of these venture capital deals because people, again, are being pushed out in the risk curve. So the policymakers are telling you what to do. And so, again, I laugh because people come back to me, oh, investing in real estate, you shouldn't do that. That should be immoral. Everybody should own a house. It's like, okay, fine. I understand you might not agree with it, but it's like, listen, I don't want to be poor either. Look, I'm an entrepreneur. I don't have a pension. I don't want to work till I'm 90 years old. I don't think anybody does. So it's just the hypocrisy around, again, some of the messaging. And so, I just want to explain, that this is exactly where the system comes into play. I actually want to highlight a tweet from Luke Groman. He says, last year, Hirschman Capital noted that since 1821, 98% of sovereigns that hit 130% of debt to GDP have defaulted on their sovereign debt. The US hit 130% late last year, and Canada is in the exact same boat, and so is a lot of the rest of the global economy. There are only two ways for sovereigns to default. It's through inflation or a collapse. And I can tell you that collapse is not an option. That is not the solution that they're going to readily pick. And so this is what I'm saying is understand the system. So Steve, this guy's invested in real estate. Why? If I can fix debt for a certain amount of time and I know that your exit game has to be inflation, you have to basically, you have to print away the value of the debt. You need to devalue your currency in order to get out of this solution. Not just me, not just households, but your corporations are leveraged and your governments are leveraged. That I know the game because the history has already shown it to me, and I can see exactly what you're doing. Now, you might come out and say as your central bank, hey, listen, we're going to slowly try to taper quantitative easing. This is not good, guys. And the government comes out, oh, we're watching house prices. No, you're not. No, you're not. Actions speak louder than words. If you were genuinely concerned about this, as I've said before, if you were genuinely concerned about the valuation of housing, you would stop QE tomorrow and you'd start raising interest rates and you just start choking off credit for the vast majority of the housing market. You can change housing tomorrow, but it's not going to happen because that's not how the system is designed and how it will play out. So again, I want to emphasize you can either play or you can be played. I prefer to, if I'm going to sit here and put in a week, every week do a YouTube video and put in 60 hours a week working on my business, I would prefer to at least one day be able to kick back and put my feet up and enjoy the fruits of my labor. So for those of you that have been supporting the channel, I genuinely appreciate it. I think that we're building a really strong community here. I think we have very large plans moving forward. We're bringing on a lot of great guests. Obviously, I think some of you had said, and again, if you want to talk about the system, here, I just did an interview with Pierre Poilievre. I mean, you can go back and watch that interview. We peeled back all the onions. Again, there's probably more that he can and can't say. But we just talked about it there, and even the politicians know. Yes, he might be the opposition and will say what he needs to or wants to say, but the reality is like everybody knows the end game. Nobody will, you're just not going to hear about it on CBC. So keep that in mind. We are building a fantastic community here. I genuinely appreciate all your support. We will continue to be the go-to resources for, people in finance here in Canada. Again, we got some massive guests coming on here in the coming weeks. I've actually got the next one, I will, spoiler alert, is Ben Rabideau. Ben is a good buddy of mine with North Cove Advisors. He does institutional research to hedge funds and big banking clients and the likes, developers. So extremely, again, this is a subscription only kind of guy. That's where he makes his money, does, deep dive research. And, just having the ability to have access to him, to get him onto the channel, going to provide a lot of value for people that are, looking at the Canadian housing space in particular. Ben is a guy that's been extremely balanced over the last 15 years. I would argue tilted has been more bearish than not over the last, say, 10 years. Has obviously more recently turned bullish along, but a guy that, again, follows the data and says, hey, listen, like, I can't change this. If this is the game that the governments and policymakers want to take, this is my thoughts. And so I'll leave you with that. I hope that video helped. Obviously, I hope it didn't ramble on too much. We'll see you next week.